Thank you to Wilmer Hale, who has offered to host the training, the physical space, and set up the webinar and the recording and all that. So we're very grateful for that. My name is Mitch Montgomery. I am an AmeriCorps attorney at Project Citizenship, and I am here with Jessica Johnson, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Jessica Johnson. I'm a Northeastern law student on co-op at Project Citizenship.
And as you know, we are going to focus the training today on how to complete successfully fee waivers for your low-income pro bono immigration clients. And as I mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions, both those of you here in person and listening on the webinar, but we will save a little bit of time at the end to answer some questions as well. So what we're going to do today is basically go through the I-912, which is the standardized fee waiver request that USCIS uses, and talk about the three main ways to request a fee waiver, which are means-tested benefits, income-based, and financial hardship. And then we'll also talk briefly about there's a reduced fee request that's available for naturalization applications that we'll talk about as well. But we'll focus most on the income-based, since that's kind of the most difficult to prove and have accepted.
Tree.
Joined.
So as everyone's aware, USCIS, the Citizenship and Immigration Service that adjudicates immigration benefits, is a fee-funded agency,
Joined.
which requires that most of their benefits and benefit applications and forms have filing fees to be able to file those applications. And as we learned with the most recent government shutdown, a fee-funded federal agency means that USCIS graciously stays open during a government shutdown. So that's fun. But like I said, all of the applications have fees, and they're expensive. They can be a pretty significant barrier to filing for one of these immigration benefits. And we certainly see the cost as being one of the barriers to citizenship at Project Citizenship. And a list of all of the fees are both on USCIS's website and in the regulations at 8 CFR 103.7. So if you have a pro bono client who's low income and can't afford those fees, you can request a fee waiver, which USCIS provides for most of the benefit applications. And under the regulations, a fee waiver must be a written request that states the reasons for the inability to pay and evidence to support the reasons indicated. USCIS does not require a specific form, so it can literally be something that the applicant writes themselves and provides the documents. But they do have Form I-912, which is a standardized fee waiver request on which to request fee waivers for all applications. So you can use the same I-912 to request a fee waiver for an N-400, an N-600, I-485, whatever the form is. And again, it's not necessary, but it's obviously a good idea, because you know that if you complete that form, you're giving USCIS all of the information that they need to process the request. So who qualifies for a fee waiver? I mean, it's basically an inability to pay the application fee, but there are three bases to be able to qualify for a fee waiver. And the first is either the applicant or the requester's spouse or the requester's head of household that's living in the household currently receives a means-tested benefit. And we'll talk a little bit more about what a means-tested benefit is. But basically, it's It's Medicaid, SNAP benefits, any public benefit that's administered based on the applicant's level of income. And the second basis is income at or below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines, and that's household income. So that's everyone living in the household. The household income must be below what DHS sets out in Form I-912P. So it actually lists out what the income requirement is for a household of one, a household of two, and so on. And we'll look a little bit more at that as well. And then the third is a financial hardship, which is rare. I don't think, since I've been at Project Citizenship, we haven't done a financial hardship fee waiver. And they're just, as I'll talk about it briefly, but it's extremely difficult to prove and hard to have accepted. So those are pretty rare. So the I-912 is, you can find the I-912 and all USCIS forms online. And I wanted to just go through the form, or at least the first couple parts of the form, so you can take a look at it. The I-912 should be here in person, and then hopefully you got Eric's email yesterday afternoon with a copy of that and all the materials we're using today as well. But basically in part one, you're just choosing the basis for your request. And there should be only one. There's chances are that if the applicant receives a means tested benefit, their income may be low enough to qualify for the income-based fee waiver. But as you'll see, we'll talk about, a means tested benefit is usually easier to prove than the income-based. So if an applicant is receiving a means tested benefit, you'll just check that one and fill out the fee waiver for just one basis for the request. And then part two is just basic information about the requester, who is usually the applicant. And just one thing to note about that, there is a section for any other names used. Sometimes someone's Mass Health may be in a slightly different name, or use a middle name as a first name, or whatever the case may be. If whatever the benefit that's being documented, if that lists a name different than the current legal name, you would want to put that there. And otherwise, that part is fairly straightforward. Note that in part three, you're listing all applications for which the requester is requesting a fee waiver for. It is possible to file one fee waiver for multiple applications and multiple people. But you would want to just, if you do that, be sure that the applications are being packaged together. So for instance, if you have 3 family members all filing an N-400 at the same time, you can file one fee waiver request for all 3 of those family members if they're all part of the same household. Or if you're filing more than one benefit application at the same time, you can use one fee waiver for both of those. But again, just make sure they're packaged together. And then, as I mentioned, parts 4 through 6 are the 3 bases for the fee waiver, and you're only going to complete one of those. And Jessica is going to walk us through the means tested benefits.
Okay, so I'm going to, like Mitch said, walk you through means tested benefits, which are we use this for the majority of our clients at Project Citizenship, and this is the easiest to prove. So a means tested benefit is a public benefit where the person's eligibility is determined based on their income. So, and this can be federally, state, or locally funded. Some examples are SNAP, food stamps, Medicaid insurance, which would be Mass Health Standard, Usually we ask if they pay a copay at the doctor, and if they don't, they probably have Mass Health Standard. Then SSI, temporary assistance to needy families, Section 8 housing, other housing benefits, fuel assistance, or WIC. So these are all things that we frequently use for the means-tested benefit fee waiver, and that USCIS will accept.
But note that list is not necessarily exhaustive. It can be anything that's publicly administered based on the receiver of the benefits income.
So some things that USCIS will not accept as mean-tested benefits. So Social Security, retirement benefits, or disability insurance, they do not accept these. They don't accept student financial aid, Medicare, or unemployment benefits. So unfortunately, you cannot use these for a fee waiver based on means-tested benefits. So to prove receipt of a means-tested benefit, the document that you turn in with the fee waiver must have the name of the person receiving the benefit. It must have the name of the agency that's awarding the benefit. It must have the type of benefit that is being awarded, and it needs to indicate that the person is currently receiving the benefit. So supposedly this means that it's dated within a year, but practically we like to send something that is dated within the last 3 to 4 months. So the most recent, the better. And if it's not in English, it does need to be translated into English. So this is an example of a sufficient proof. So this is a letter from the Massachusetts DTA. So it has the name of the person who's receiving the benefit, though it's blacked out in the corner. It has the agency, which is the Department of Transitional Assistance. It has the type of benefit that they're receiving, which is SNAP in the amount of $194. And it's dated February 22nd, 2017. So practically this could have been sent in from February to about June of 2017 to be considered recent enough. And these are some examples of what is not sufficient. So you can't just send in a copy of the Mass Health card. We send a permission to share info to Mass Health to request a letter that has a date on it, and it says that the person is currently receiving the benefit. So that would work, but not just a copy of their card. And then this housing letter would also not be sufficient. It, first of all, is stating the benefits have been suspended due to failure to comply with inspection standards. So that's not saying that they're currently receiving it. So that wouldn't be sufficient.
It's also not on. We've had problems with specifically Section 8 housing benefits not being on like government letterhead or some sort of public agency letterhead. So if it's not clear that the organization that's administering the benefit is a public entity or organization, we've been having trouble having those accepted as well.
So in order to complete the I-912 for a means-tested benefit, you would fill out Section 4 on page 2 of the I-912. So you need to put the full name of the person receiving the benefit and their relationship to you. It can be a spouse, it can be a parent of a person who is under 21 years old, the head of household, a legal guardian. And then you need the name of the awarding agency, which for this example would be Mass Department of Transitional Assistance, the type of benefit, which in this case would be SNAP, and then the date it was awarded and the date it expires to show that it is recent and it is currently being received. So I'm going to start us off on income-based fee waivers as well. So to qualify for an income-based fee waiver, the applicant must demonstrate that the income of their entire household is at or below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines, which if you have the materials, there is a chart on Form I-912P that gives you those numbers. So a household includes the applicant, their spouse, parents living with the applicant, and any of these individuals. An unmarried child under 21 living with the applicant, unmarried child between 21 and 24 who is a full-time student living with the applicant, unmarried child for whom the applicant is the legal guardian, and any dependents listed on the federal tax return. So all of these people would be considered in their household, and all of the income of these people would be considered when determining if the household is at or below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines. So income, the federal definition is broad. It includes all of these things: wages, alimony, child support, educational support, pensions, unemployment benefits, Social Security benefits, any other sort of financial support. So all of these things are considered income and need to be included on the fee waiver.
Federal student loans, we have confirmed, does not count as income for purposes of a fee waiver, but someone who's a full-time student in school and is supporting themselves based solely on federal or student loans would just need to document the amount of loans that they're receiving and their tuition, living expenses, things like that, which normally can come in the form of a letter from the school, from the financial aid office that usually has what the cost of tuition and all of that listed out is. But student loans do not count as income.
So here's the chart that I was just referencing, Form I-912P. So this would be all of the numbers that you would need to match for if you're at or below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines. So household of one, you would need to make at or below 18,210, and so on and so forth. So, and they update this chart every year. So to prove that you are at or below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines, you have to document your income and your household size. So the applicant can give the following things to prove that. The federal tax return is probably the best. They can give recent pay stubs, about 1 month's worth, Social Security statements, affidavits from family members that are providing financial support to the applicant, or a letter from student loan offices, which Mitch just talked about, listing the amount of their loans and then tuition and living costs.
The easiest way to prove that is the most recent tax return, right? If an applicant hasn't changed job, if income hasn't changed at all since filing the last tax return, you can just provide for example, the 2017 tax return as proof of income. And especially right now where people have fairly recently filed 2017 taxes, that can usually be accepted as the only proof of income as long as it's got all the household members listed on the tax return as dependents. And then if income has changed since filing the tax return, you would want to include recent pay stubs for whatever the job is. And that is 1 month's worth. And USCIS is pretty stringent on requiring the most recent month. So if you file a fee waiver request in June, USCIS is usually going to want to see May's pay stubs. And then you're basically calculating what an annual income would be based on a month's worth of pay stubs for that person or for that household.
Okay, so we're going to give 2 examples of completing the income fee waiver. So I'll be covering the easy example. If you have your materials in front of you, I'll be talking about the tax return that's on the single sheet. So this example, so you would be completing Part 5 on the I-912 for those with income at or below 150%. So this particular person in this example is employed full-time, so you would check employment status as employed full-time. And then, so this example is a married couple. Both spouses are employed, and they have 1 child who is a student and is listed as a dependent on their tax return. So even though in this example the student is over 24, he is listed as a dependent, so he would count as in calculating their income and the size of their household. So their total income, as you can see on the tax return, is $22,513. they filed the tax return jointly, and that is both of their income. And since the child has no income, there is no additional income to put on the household income. So since it's a household of 3, if you look at your chart on page I-912P, the household size is 3, so it needs to be at or below 31,170, which it is below. So they do meet the requirements for a full income fee waiver for a household of 3. And then in this section is where you would list if there are any changes, as Mitch mentioned, if there are any changes in income since filing taxes, which in this case there have not been. So you would just put the full amount on the income tax return and select no, that there has been no changes. So this is a fairly easy example if you have 2 spouses working, filing their taxes jointly, and dependents who are not working with no income. That would be ideal, but not in every case. Especially a lot of our clients have large households with many people earning income. So Mitch is going to talk about that kind of situation.
All right. So the example that I am going to go through is it starts out with the 2016 tax return. And just as a reminder to those on the webinar, if you could please mute your line to reduce some background noise. Again, you're filling out the I-912 the exact same way. This I-912 was completed for an individual who was not married, employed, and had a household size of, I believe, 6. So we have to document this person's income as well as the income of all of the members of the household. So we had 6 members. As you can see, the I-912 only has room for 4 household members, but there is room, I believe, on the last page of the I-912 to list more information. So you would just list, as we did when we completed this fee waiver, you would just list the additional 2 household members and all of the information in that chart in that section. So there were 6 household members, 2 of whom had income that was being contributed to the household. So we had to document both of those persons' incomes. And the first is the 2016 tax return that's at the very front of this example. And this is the applicant's income. So that's listed as her annual income. And then if you flip to the pay stubs, this was the second household member's income documentation. So her income was, wait, let me make sure I've got this right. Yeah, so I'm sorry, this was the applicant's, these are the applicant's pay stubs because her income had changed since the last time she filed taxes. So we had to include her tax return and pay stubs. And her pay stubs exhibited a amount of income that was different from what was on her 2016 tax return. So what I did is took the gross pay for a month's worth of income, and these, you can see that these pay stubs were issued every week. So we needed 4 of them to document an entire month's worth. And the gross pay was $192 on the first one, $192, $280, $50, and $96. So I added all of those up, divided by 4 to get an average week, and then multiplied by 52 to get an annual income. And this is all going to be documented in Part 5, Item 9. Under this section, has anything changed since the date you last filed federal tax returns? And so I noted that she began a new job, and her current monthly income at that job is $798, which equates to an annual income of just over $9,000. So I laid out, I used the evidence that's provided with the fee waiver request and laid out exactly what her annual income is currently. And then I did the same thing with the household member who also works. This person was in the same situation. She had a 2016 tax return, but her income had changed since since she filed 2016 taxes. And so I did the same thing with that person. Her income wasn't much different, but I still provided pay stubs and current annual income. And then you'll notice on her, it's blacked out, but you'll notice on this person's tax return that there's a dependent listed, which was another member of the household. And so if someone is listed as a dependent on a tax return, they're obviously not, they don't have any income, and so you don't need to provide proof of income. And the fact that they're listed as a dependent qualifies as proof of no income for purposes of the fee waiver request. So that gets us to 3 household members. We still have 3 others who we have to document. And just another reminder to those on the webinar, please mute your line. We're getting some background conversations. Okay, so if we go back to, we see we have a mother who is also a member of the household, and this we provided proof that she has no income in the form of this letter from the DTA confirming that she has SNAP benefits. So this isn't used as a means-tested benefit, but it can be proof. Receipt of a means-tested benefit for a household member can be used as proof of no income or extremely low income. So that's what we use for her. So that's 4. And then the other 2, they're not listed on this example, but the other 2 members of the household were children under 18. So those were those people had no income, and so that gets us to a household of 6, and a total household income. So I listed the total household income based on the 2 tax returns, and then listed total household income based on the current annual income based on the pay stubs that I submitted, which was a little bit less. So the total annual income. Give me 1 second.
Can is not on mute on the phone? Please put your phone on mute. It's very distracting. We can't hear the speakers.
Left.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So the current annual income for this household was $30,668. For a household of 6, you can look at the I-912 and see that this household was well within the range to qualify for a fee waiver. And a couple things to note when you're completing this, and especially when you're completing an income fee waiver, is that USCIS will line everything up with the application that you're submitting. So, for example, if you're submitting an N400, a naturalization application, the applicant has to list their current address, their employment history, and so they're going to check and make sure that everything matches up, and that what you're reporting on the fee waiver is what you're reporting on the benefit application. Does that all make sense to everyone? It certainly took us, I think, years to really figure out how to properly document income, especially for a household that's large, and for some members of the household that aren't working and some are. But hopefully that gives you a sense of how to document a complicated household. And then, as I mentioned, there is a reduced fee available for only the N400. So this is not available for any other immigration benefit application. It's just for the citizenship application. And it's just based on income. So it's the exact same process that we just went through. It's on a different form. It's the I-942. But you'll see if you look at the I-942 that it's almost exactly like the I-912 for the income-based fee waiver part. And that reduces the N400 fee from $725 to $405. And to qualify for a reduced fee, your income must be above 150%, which is the cutoff for a fee waiver, but below 200%, so in between 150 and 200%. And then the I-942P is where you're going to look for the guidelines to see what the 200% number is. And I think it starts off for a household of one, it's like 6,000 more, so I think it's 24,000 something to qualify for a reduced fee. And then continues to go up a little bit as you increase the household size. But it does provide a little bit of help to someone who doesn't qualify for a full fee waiver, but is still fairly low income. And then briefly...
Hi, excuse me. Can you go back to the means-based testing and something someone mentioned in passing regarding applying to Mass Health for the letter? Can you just explain how that's done and what's required?
Yeah, so our process at Project Citizenship is that we've established a good relationship with Mass Health, where we have the applicant sign a PSI, so a request that or a permission for Mass Health to send us information about the applicant, and then they send us back a letter that meets USCIS's standards for a proof of a means-tested benefit. So it has the Mass Health letterhead. It states that the person is currently receiving benefits and all of that. So it's very easy to prove that the person is on Mass Health. And when you're just doing this for one client, you're probably going to have to rely on the applicant themselves to get that letter. It doesn't have to be that standard letter that we get. It can be anything that proves that they're currently receiving a benefit. One thing to note about Medicaid specifically is the tax form that I don't know what the number is, but the tax form that lists the months that you were covered for health insurance for that year, that does not work. So if you had the 2017 tax form that shows that the applicant received Medicaid for certain months of the year, USCIS has not accepted that. And I assume they haven't accepted it because it's not proof of current receipt of benefits. So just be aware of that.
Okay.
Joined.
Does that answer your question?
That's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And again, so the third method of applying for a fee waiver is a financial hardship. And the language used is if you or any family members have a situation that has caused you to incur expenses, debts, or loss of income. And it requires listing of all liquid assets, so assets that can be easily converted to cash, and total monthly expenses and liabilities, which, as you can imagine, is difficult. So it was hard enough to provide just proof of current income. And like I said, I don't think that we at Project Citizenship have ever used one of these. And so I honestly have, we've had 3. Have we had any approved? Okay, 0 approved. So we've tried 3 and have had 0 approved. So I honestly don't know a whole lot beyond what the instructions would say about how to have one of those approved. But I imagine that it would be extremely difficult. And then just final steps on the I-912. As I've talked about, the requester is normally the applicant, but it's the person who's requesting the fee waiver. And if you're not using the one I-912 for more than one application, you can skip Part 8 on the I-912. If the requester doesn't speak English and uses an interpreter, then you'll complete Part 9. Otherwise, you just leave Part 9 blank, and then complete Part 10 if you're the one preparing the form for the client. And then I talked about extra space for the household members that were above 4, and that's Part 11. So you can use that for anything, whatever requires extra space on the form. And just some cautionary notes. I've talked about this, but USCIS looks at whatever application you're submitting, you're requesting a fee waiver for, to make sure that everything matches up to the I-912. And if it doesn't, they will deny the I-912, and you also may have issues with failing to disclose or misrepresenting things on the actual benefit application. So you want to make sure that all of that matches up. USCIS has in the past at times questioned our applicant, or a few of our applicants at an interview who have applied for and received a fee waiver based on receipt of SNAP benefits from the DTA, but who have had travel outside the United States for 30 days or more during the time that they were receiving SNAP benefits. So I think the DTA requires you to report a change in income. Well, I know it requires you to report a change of income or I guess absence from the state for 30 days or more. And so just be aware of that. If you see that the applicant has had SNAP benefits for 3 years and they had a 4-month trip during that time, you may have some issues with using a receipt of SNAP benefits for a means tested benefit for the fee waiver. And being rejected once is not the end all be all. We certainly try until I think we've sent probably are the most times we've ever submitted one fee waiver for the same person is 5, and I think we ultimately got that one accepted. So do resubmit if you think the applicant is eligible for the fee waiver and you just USCIS didn't accept the proof for whatever reason.
How long do they take to process?
4 to 6 weeks, I would say. So it is frustrating to have to go through that process a couple times before USCIS even starts processing the application. But yeah, if you have a low-income client, it's worth it to get that fee waiver and then process the application. There is so the USCIS entity that accepts all applications and processes these fee waivers is known as Lockbox, and they do have an email. So when if you submit a fee waiver with an application and it's rejected, you'll get a rejection notice back um, maybe explaining the reason why it was rejected. Um, and it'll say on there, if you have any questions, contact Lockbox. And there's an email that you can email if you believe that the proof that you provided for the fee waiver request is sufficient. You can email Lockbox and I usually phrase it as like asking for an explanation, but saying, I think this should have been accepted. Can you explain why it was not? And we've had applications fee waivers that have been accepted after emailing Lockbox. So it is possible if you think that USCIS just made a mistake, there's an avenue to challenge that.
Talk about highlighters.
So we used to highlight certain things on like the supporting documents to sort of show the relevant income information and all of that. And apparently most highlights, so USCIS scans everything that they receive. And apparently some highlighters, when it scans, just cover up the information. And we've had applications that have been denied because we've highlighted and covered up the information. So avoid the use of highlighters. And I just wanted to mention briefly, it's certainly a big news in immigration circles, but you may have heard about the leak of a proposed new regulation regarding public charges. So just briefly, when you're applying to adjust status, normally to become a lawful permanent resident, certain applicants have to prove that they are unlikely to become what's called a public charge. And in the past, that has been fairly easy. I think it's only like very, very minute, very discrete government benefits that, if they're being received, can go into the factor of whether someone's likely to become a public charge. This new rule that has been leaked, and it's not published yet, so it's not, the comment period hasn't even started, but it was leaked, and it greatly increases the factors that go into this determination, and it includes receipt of basically any public benefit. So it includes SNAP benefits, Medicaid, Section 8 housing, and all of that. So the receipt of those benefits may, if this proposed rule becomes regulation, it may impact the ability of an immigrant who's applying for adjustment of status to be able to be on one of these means-tested benefits. I don't know how, if at all, it will affect applying for a fee waiver based on a means-tested benefit. This public charge analysis is not a question in naturalization, so we don't deal with it. But I would certainly be concerned that someone applying for an N-400 with a means-tested benefit fee waiver could have their prior green card approval sort of re-adjudicated based on the fact that they are now a public charge in the eyes of USCIS. So I just say that I don't know how, if at all, it would affect fee waivers, but just keep that in mind if it does actually become regulation. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Could you specify what you mean by public charge? I'm just a little confused about that. So
it's a legal term of art that is it's an admissibility question when someone is applying to become a lawful permanent resident. So one of the requirements to become a lawful permanent resident for most for at least a number of immigrants is that they have to prove that they are not likely to become a public charge. So they are not likely to rely on the government for subsistence, that they're not likely to not be able to live and work without the help of the government. And so that's what the public charge means. And again, it's not an issue with naturalization. It may not be an issue with fee waivers, but since we've been talking about means tested benefits, I just wanted to bring it up.
Okay,
Does that help?
thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any others?
I have a question.
Okay.
So, you know, in the clinics that I participated in, we've had the person who needs the fee waiver just sign a form, and I think that those are being filled out back at Project Citizenship later on. Is there a way we can volunteer to fill out fee waivers or beyond the clinics?
So certainly at the clinics, there's an opportunity to complete the means tested benefits fee waivers, and we usually do try to convince a few people to help us out with that towards the end of those clinics. We have never used volunteers to complete the income-based fee waivers because we've just found that they're too difficult. But I would certainly be very interested in volunteers for that. What's your name?
Crystal Calm, I'm at Goodwin.
Great, awesome. Yeah, if Veronica says you'll be getting a personal training. But yeah, I mean, if you're if you're interested,
it seems kind of like mathy, and I like that. I like filling out forms. So
yeah, no, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right, any others? All right, well, thanks everyone so much. Thanks again to Wilmer Hale for allowing us to use their space and providing all of the technology. And hope you found this helpful. If anyone has any further questions or needs a certificate of attendance, my email is there on the slides. Please feel free to email me, and we'll take care of it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.